Good morning, good afternoon, and good day, everyone. My name is Suheysen Revindran, and I'm currently pursuing my postgraduate degree in Masters in Education by Research at Universiti Utara, Malaysia. And today, I am delighted to be presenting to you my study entitled Assessing the Viability of Audio Mathematics Test Items on Mathematics Performance Among the Orang Asli Pupils. Without further ado, allow me to begin. As we all know, mathematics is an important subject that allows us to develop important skills and abilities that we could practice in everyday lives. However, to assess mathematics, valid mathematics tests should be developed that allows a true measurement of mathematics skills and knowledge of pupils. This allows us to obtain a more accurate interpretation of their test scores that reflects their true knowledge in mathematics. However, specific groups of pupils have continued to suffer or lag behind mainstream peers, and this is observed among the indigenous pupils. This, as the indigenous pupils fall behind their mainstream peers, this has resulted in a widening mathematics achievement gap that have been observed between the two groups. One possible reason that have been attributed to this widening achievement gap is the unique cultural and educational experiences of the indigenous pupils that have seldom been considered when developing mathematics tests, as most mathematics tests have been developed to cater to the mainstream population. This notion has also been observed among our Malaysian indigenous Orang Asli pupils, whereby they face unique challenges that have impacted their ability to perform well during the test. In this study, there were three problems that were identified, where in the first problem that was identified was that the Malaysian indigenous Orang Asli pupils, they lack the required proficiency in the formal language. And this is mainly caused by that mismatch between the formal language that is used during mathematics teaching and learning and has the language of assessment when developing mathematics tests, and their own unique ethnic language. This has resulted in language barriers that have subsequently affected their comprehension in the mathematics test. Other than that, reading difficulties is another issue that has been faced by the pupils, and this stems from their lack of development of the formal language. This has subsequently resulted in their inability to comprehend and decode the written text that subsequently affected their mathematics performance. Another issue is the mathematics test itself, and as we all know, mathematics is very language and also reading a heavy subject, and these were unnecessarily measured as most pupils who lack language and reading ability are subsequently affected. This results in invalid test scores that are obtained that actually do not represent the true mathematical knowledge and skills obtained by the indigenous pupils. Therefore, to address these issues, this study therefore aims to examine the viability of using audio mathematics test items in both the formal language and the ethnic language as possible test accommodations for the Orang Asli pupils. Before we proceed to the research methodology and findings, allow me to shed some light on the topic of mathematics performance and a language. For instance, there is a disconnect between the ethnic language and formal language that have been found to affect people's abilities, that hinders their ability to both comprehend word problem items, to comprehend the vocabulary, and to even comprehend the instruction during the mathematics test. Furthermore, studies have advocated the use of the ethnic language to be incorporated, particularly among the indigenous pupils, to help reduce the language demands of the mathematics test. Studies have been conducted in Malaysia among the Orang Asli pupils, whereby when the ethnic language has been incorporated in the test, they have been able to perform significantly better compared to those administered in the formal language. Other than that, there is also a correlation between reading ability and also mathematics performance, whereby a study by Powell and colleagues in 2013 found that pupils with reading difficulties who they were unable to comprehend and decode the written text. This led to the lower mathematics performance that were observed among their pupils. This is also observed among indigenous pupils, whereby the reading difficulties faced by them is mainly attributed because of their lack of proficiency in the formal language, which is also observed among our Orang Asli pupils. Therefore, to remove the language and literacy barriers that have been faced by these pupils, audio mathematics test items have been used as a form of test accommodation to address this. For instance, Boat and Thurlow in 2007 found that pupils who have reading difficulties, they were able to perform significantly better when audio mathematics test items were used compared to a solely written test. In Malaysia, the study by S. Kanageswari and colleagues found that in the incorporation of audio test items in the ethnic language of the Orang Asli pupils with the written test, it was found that pupils were able to perform significantly better when the audio mathematics test items in the ethnic language were supplemented with the written test. Therefore, the language barriers and reading difficulties faced by these pupils have been shown to be able to be mitigated by using audio test items as a form of test accommodation. This would allow us to actually obtain a more valid interpretation of the test scores, particularly among the indigenous pupils. Therefore, the methodology of the study, whereby the sample consisted of 124 grade 4 Orang Asli pupils that were from the Temiar ethnic group, where 7 rural primary schools within the states of Perak and Kelantan were selected in Peninsular Malaysia. The instruments of the study consist of there were 3 instruments that were developed for the study. First, 40 mathematics test items were first developed that were comprised into the written test in the Malay language. Subsequently, these test items were then audio recorded to form the audio test items in the Malay language, while the development of the audio test items in the Temiar language were carried out by first trans-adapting, whereby the test items were adapted to suit cultural and linguistic, to ensure cultural and linguistic equivalence to the Temiar ethnic group, and also subsequently translated into the Temiar language. This was then audio recorded to subsequently form the audio test items. The 3 tests were then spirally administered to 3 equivalent groups that were formed in each primary schools. For the data analysis, descriptive statistics and the one-way ANOVA were subsequently used to compare the mean test scores obtained between the 3 tests. For further analysis was then carried out, whereby a post hoc multiple comparison analysis was used to compare the group pair means and to determine the groups that were significantly different from each other. On this slide, we can see the results of the descriptive statistics obtained for the mathematics test score between the 3 tests. The finding shows that the pupils had performed the highest when administered the audio test in the Malay language, followed by the audio test items in the ethnic language, and lastly, the pupils had obtained the lowest performance in the written test in the Malay language. However, based on the descriptive statistics obtained, it is seen that the mean test scores obtained between the audio test items in both Malay and Temiar language are approximately the same. Therefore, overall, the Orang Asli pupils had performed better when administered the audio test items in both languages compared to solely the written test. From the one-way ANOVA that was carried out, the finding shows that the mathematics test scores across the 3 tests are therefore significantly different. It is presumed then, therefore, that the mathematics performance of the Orang Asli pupils were then significantly different between the 3 tests. When the post hoc analysis were then carried out, the results indicate that there is actually a statistically significant difference in the mathematics test scores between the written test and the audio test in the Malay language, and also the written test and the audio test in the Temiar language, the ethnic language. However, between the 2 audio test items in the 2 languages, there is no statistically significant difference between the audio test items in the Temiar and the Malay language. The findings are therefore consistent with most studies carried out where Orang Asli pupils had performed significantly better when administered audio test items in their ethnic language compared to their lower performance in the written test in the formal language. Other than that, the high performance in the audio test items that were observed for both the formal and the ethnic language also indicates that in some way the audio test items were able to minimize or reduce the reading demands posed by the written test items. And this is consistent with the findings by Bolt and Thurlow, particularly among students who experience reading difficulties. Other than that, the approximately similar performance in the audio test items for both languages indicates that the choice of language used in the development of the audio test do not significantly affect the mathematics performance. And this particular finding is contradictory to most studies, because most studies propose that one of the reason that students were unable to perform well, particularly among the indigenous pupils, was that lack of proficiency in the formal language. However, in this study, language do not seem to show any consistent results. Therefore, the findings instead suggest that language skills, such as reading ability, may play a more significant role in impacting mathematics performance, particularly among the Orang Asli pupils. Therefore, to conclude this study, mathematics test developers should all consider the language component when developing mathematics tests for the Orang Asli pupils. Furthermore, the findings from the studies also show that the audio test items in both languages could be used as a promising and even a viable test accommodation to help accurately assess the mathematics performance of the pupils. Therefore, by integrating technology via audio delivery of the test items and using a more inclusive and holistic testing practice, the mathematics test can be a tool that allows us to assess and evaluate mathematic knowledge and abilities more accurately among the indigenous pupils. Therefore, that concludes my study, my presentation of my study, and I thank you very much for your time. Thank you.